Welcome to another episode of Get the Gist. Today we are joined by Tom Redding, Executive Vice President and Healthcare Practice Leader at St. Onge Company, a name well respected in the world of supply chain and facility design. With nearly 2 decades at the firm, Tom's seen the evolution of healthcare logistics up closely. He is now leading the strategy in a time where efficiency, resilience, and patient care are more connected than ever before. Tom, welcome to the podcast. Very happy to be with you.
You for the opportunity to speak. Yeah, great seeing you,
Okay.
Colin.
So, Tom, just quickly, because in last 2 decades, you have seen the whole evolution of whole supply chain as well as the operation consulting. So, and specifically you being from the healthcare section, how have you seen the changes happening, and especially after COVID? What are the changes? How things have been? How it has evolved?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in the last 2 decades, a lot's changed, but I think, in general, the healthcare supply chain is a bit of a laggard compared to other industries. I think, there's a lot of learnings coming from other industries. Many folks are kind of moving into more of leadership roles in healthcare supply chain organizations. So we're seeing that's a big push. It's bringing in new perspectives on it. I think in the last, call it 5 years, significant amount of energy around putting systems in place, getting access to the data, start to use that data to make some decisions. And as we, as facility designers, I think it also comes back to is there's a lot of energy around expansions of hospitals, and what does that mean in terms of robotics and the use of maybe kind of automation with those new facilities. Again, in the last few years, and even in the last couple of years, it's been certainly an uptick in the idea of how do you leverage data, how do you use AI, how do you leverage robotics. All those things have certainly come to the forefront. Quite frankly, a lot of industries have been using robotics and other things for many years, and healthcare is again a bit of a laggard there, and will continue to kind of evolve over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So data and analytics data is extremely important now. So how open in your side to use the data, and how much of patient data or related data you're able to use for your different kind of analytics? How easy or difficult to get access to those?
Yeah, I think I mean, it doesn't matter who you talk to. There's so many different systems, so many different subsystems, so many different data tables, and there's so much information out there. I think the tough part is how do you knit them all together. Again, if you look at you're in sterile processing, or you're in pharmacy, or you're in medical surgical distribution, every one of those again departments have their own systems. No different in the clinical, there's different clinical systems. And I think for us as we do projects is again, how do you get the connection between these different data sets, and how can you start to use those to inform changes, whether it's process improvement or whether it's designing new facilities in terms of sizing based on the volume. Again, if it's also potential cost savings opportunities. So if we're looking at something in the cath lab, what they're doing there versus other areas, and how do you start to understand that aggregation that comes with looking at these different systems and trying to get some sort of key, if you want to call it that, to connect the dots and know what's where and what's being used. And sometimes even these subsystems call the same thing different things. So
Mm.
it's there's a lot of energy around data cleansing to even get something meaningful out of it. I mean, there's a lot there, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come. But again, getting something meaningful can be a bit of a challenge. You
Right.
know.
So, any specific stories around during the COVID time that you have, got with certain challenges around in the whole supply chain system, and what are the, any specific learnings from there to improvise on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you think about, you have large, let's just say it's a large health system, and, they're trying to get, the PPE, the gowns, the gloves and masks and those types of things. And, we had some clients that were, they didn't know how much visibility, they didn't know how much inventory they had, across the enterprise. That was kind of step one. So again, there's a bit of reaction as kind of a first step. And then the next step is potentially to have different buyers and different folks going out to the market to secure products that might be paying different prices for different things, for the same thing, I should say. And it's
Mm.
like you're competing against yourself within the market. And it's like your own health system. It's like, how's that possible? But it comes back to is they're just the systems, the communication, everybody's out for themselves. It's no different than, again, you might have a more sophisticated healthcare supply chain that is again getting ahead of their smaller, competitors, and they're able to secure product, or they're able to get visibility what inventory they have. So I think at some level, that normalization of the data to know what you have where is going to be incredibly important. I think it became very apparent for many health systems, and now many health systems are trying to figure out, like, how do I put things in place, whether it's the different systems and the connectivity of those things, and the interoperability of those different systems to each other. I think is on the forefront, because again, if you live in a bit of a silo and you operate in a silo, there's a lot of inefficiencies that come of it. And it's like that data is the foundation to help make sound business decisions.
Correct. So one of the important thing, I guess, is the whole predictability of what is required, how much, what's going to come, and the demand, primarily demand and supply. So for those, I would assume the whole analytics that you guys are working or building with the data, that most kind of very useful for that. So
Yeah, I mean, oh, good.
when typically people talk about logistics, they often relate to as warehouse and trucks, right? But at Saint Onge, you guys do a whole lot of things, including from hospitals to data centers, right? So how do you describe yourself? Like, what all things you guys do?
Yeah, I mean, I think at our core, we are industrial engineers. I mean, we have 180
Right.
folks in the company, about 120 industrial engineers. So we're thinking about process flow and technology, and the people flow and technology there. So I think understanding, where should you have buildings, how big should they be, the systems associated with the management of those, whether it's internal or external from transportation standpoint. Again, I think if you're a small company, large company, or you're a health system, that ability to understand what you have in your network is incredibly important. And if you're thinking about the entire supply chain, again, how do you get visibility of what your suppliers have, and how do you get visibility of what the consumption side is of what's happening in a hospital? And I think that ability to connect the dots. And again, I think for us, we work with many health systems. We also work with many of the medical device manufacturers. It could be maybe the pharma industry. Do a lot of work that support health systems. And I think if you can make that connection and understand the need from the end user standpoint, you can start to optimize the entire continuum. So again, our ability to kind of zoom out and think about how do we help the entire health system end to end is going to be incredibly important. And again, I think every individual organization kind of operates independently. There's a lot of different things to think about, but again, our ability to kind of tell that story and understand maybe where
Right.
there's some challenges upstream with your suppliers, or whether there's some downstream impact that you're not collecting data, the accuracy of the data is not appropriate. So our ability to dig into the problem, understand and assess the situation, and then come up with solutions that are unique to their environment, but understand, like, is this something that's workable? And ultimately, if we can get back to say, hey, there's some recommendations, you need to work with your suppliers to address A, B, and C, there's a tremendous amount of value there. And quite frankly, some of those might be our customers as well. It might be our clients that we're working with to help them figure out how to optimize their supply chain. So I hate to say it's a very, we talk about the global supply chain, but even within the healthcare environment, there's hundreds and hundreds of suppliers and manufacturers. And again, any of those chains along the way that break can impact patient care. Again, I think for us is to continue to, again, elevate the supply chain and the logistics, infrastructure these organizations have is incredibly important.
So one other thing you touched upon primarily is that for the whole analysis and for the supply chain, the data, and you touched upon the data accuracy and the data cleansing related to how, what all different challenges, or how do you, what all things you take care specifically for the, data accuracy and data quality to maintain. And also now, as a lot of unstructured data is also there in the whole healthcare system, right? And starting from the documentation the doctors goes through, to what has been prescribed, to what all different each of these machines data that comes up with, right, different sensor related data. So what are the different challenges, and how you guys kind of make sure that those whole data kind of gets the right quality and right massaging happens?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many steps to getting data to the right form, whether it's knitting different data sets together and getting some sort of common thread. I think there's a lot of energy to get to that point. Again, it might be like, hey, we're doing this project, but I think it sets the stage of, should they put cleansing tools in place? Should they put the people in place? Sometimes we find that the health systems don't even have the structure, they don't have the systems, they don't have anything. It's a bit of a free for all. And again, I always just kind of say when there's videos out on the internet where you see like, hey, so if I was the healthcare was a grocery store and I go in to buy something and I'm going to buy some peanut butter and I scan it, it says, oh, we can't buy one peanut butter, you got to get a case of 12. You're like, well, I don't want a case of 12, I just want one, you know, thing of peanut butter, and it goes, it's continuous, it's on and on, and just that structure is sometimes not there, and I think there's been a lot of energy to standardize across a lot of these manufacturers, a lot of especially with the FDA involved for implantables. It's a
Right.
big push on that front, but for our ability to dig into it, I mean, we might find, for example, we do a warehouse design project for a health system, and the products that they're using is so very different from the next health system to the next health system, and the structure of the data is off. So I think as time goes on, there's more and more tools out there to start to see the differences and analyze the differences and to be able to help make some recommendations on filling in the gaps, because again, right now it's a lot of health systems they're struggling, they're hamstrung by the quality of their data, and they can't
Yeah.
make good decisions.
Right. That's correct.
And and you feel for these health systems. You think about wanting to be predictive, and everyone says, hey, predictive this and predictive that, but I mean, ideally you might say, well, I want to be able to know what Tom Redding comes into the hospital. I want to be able to predict what Tom Redding's going to use. And the
Right.
data sample of me being in the hospital might be like, hey, I've only been in the hospital 2 times in my life. So do you
Mhm.
really know what I'm going to need? And there's a lot of questions around, hey, similar size to this other person, same age, same, demographics, whatever. And you start to can predict to say, hey, these are the things we're going to need. And you start ordering that and managing it. Again, there's value. There's tremendous value in that, especially helping the manufacturers, the distributors, all these things again reduce waste, potential waste,
Yeah, a
for
lot
the
of
entire supply
automations
chain.
can happen. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Right. So with the whole Gen AI related, the revolution that's happening, so how you guys kind of leveraging that, or what are the plans, and how do you see it kind of getting into your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, I think it's speed to value. So again, how do you use some of these tools to get to a decision faster? Can I design the warehouse faster? Can I make decisions in a project faster? I think those are paramount. I think as time goes on, everybody's impatient. Everybody wants something done today, and quite frankly, things change a lot. Somebody changes their mind, changes assumptions. Like, how quickly can we adapt to the project and not necessarily extend the timeline, because again, we're under timelines for our projects. I think if you're the health system and you're thinking about what should I do next, I mean, for me it's like the biggest challenge these health systems have is just visibility of what's going on. So again, if I'm a customer service agent, or I have the ability to use some sort of some sort of chatbot or whatever it is, there's so many options where I can get questions, I can ask questions about when's something going to be delivered, or where is it in progress, or is there a delay because of these reasons, or can I expedite A, B, and C. Like, I think there's so many different options out there. I think it's a matter of, a lot of this requires data maturity, and I think a lot of these health systems just aren't there yet. I think they will get there over the next few years as these tools advance, and and some of these health systems kind of, I just say, get their act together and start investing in it, investing in the quality, investing in, I hate to say, data teams to manage the data, especially when you could have 30, 40 different systems that are being used in a health
Right.
system that again are kind of primary systems, and how they talk or don't talk to each other will
Yeah, so the
clearly.
biggest challenge is the interoperability as well, right? So that's, I think, how each system talks to each
Yeah,
other.
exactly.
The data flow is one of the biggest issue, and once that is resolved, I think that's easy, becomes easy. So, with the latest trade wars, right? So, because all these supply chain, and especially for the medical world, I think there is a lot of international transfers as well. So, how do you see how it's affecting, or how it's impacting overall healthcare business, or maybe the stability of it? How do you see that?
It hasn't yet, but yeah, it definitely will be real. I mean, especially if a lot of medical device manufacturers are coming out of Europe, and those are where the real dollars are, dollars and cents being spent for supplies and equipment. I think that in itself can drive significant cost increase, especially when you're a health system and you're 1%, 2%, maybe a 5% margin. You have some that are north of that, but the vast majority is less than a 5% margin. And you increase some of these costs by a certain percentage. It's real. The thing that again is, I was at a conference recently, and there was a comment made that these health systems sign agreements. They sign an agreement with the manufacturer. This is what the price is. This is what the commitment is. Whatever it is, and it's not going to change if there's a trade war and there's a 25% tariff. These contracts are like the health system can say, well, again, that's not my problem. This is what I'm contractually responsible for paying. If your costs go up for your own reason, it's not my problem. But again, I think this is where it comes back to is a partnership between these health systems and the manufacturers to say there's a give and a take. But if you're a health system and let's just say you're a 30% or you're a 5% margin, and you're a manufacturer of medical devices and you're 40% margin, there's a lot
Mhm.
more money and profit made in those manufacturers than the health systems. And it's like, well, who's going to pay that? Who's going to take that, absorb it? It's going to be the manufacturers. I hate to say it. These health systems are going to stand, like, hey, listen, these are the agreements I signed. Again, I hope it doesn't get to that because it turns very adversarial, and again, some of these discussions can lead to potential disruptions in the supply chain. So I guess time will
Right.
tell, really.
Yeah, hopefully things will settle down. This is kind of a trouble
Yeah,
time.
it's kind of crazy right now. Yeah, it's kind of wild.
Yeah. All right. Saint Onge made into Gartner's 2024 market guide. So, what does it mean? Like, how do you guys see that? And also, how do you see your competitors and going forward? What are the different plans you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general in healthcare, I think healthcare needs industrial engineers. I think at its core. I mean, we're talking about how do you be more efficient, how do you get more effectiveness out of the resources you have, and that's whether it's a course of using technology and robotics or whether it's just classic, solve a problem, don't repeat the same mistake over and over again, and to be able to be more reliable for your service. So I think from our perspective, being an industrial engineering firm, I think folks need our services, continue to call us in that front. So I don't see that changing. I think as the margins get more and more challenging for these health systems, I think they're gonna need to be more creative. It can't be like, hey, I'm going to beat my suppliers up for another 1% or 2%. At some point, you beat them to up to into a wall. And like you can't squeeze any more out of that. So you got to really start being mindful about the operational cost and the reliability of the people that you have. It's hard to find people. It's hard to find people in a lot of support service roles. So I think our ability to help them figure out what to do, from how to leverage their space to their inventory to what's the right systems and to put in place, I think is going to be incredibly important, and it will continue to get more important as time goes on.
And for each of these hospitals, so what level of customizations are required when you you get a new customer? And do you see a lot of different changes in a particular state versus state, or in a different country? Or do you see that, typically if you use your solution in the supply chain, it's almost similar in all the states and all different hospitals?
I would say, yeah, I would definitely it's similar, but I think that the primary difference is the maturity of the health system. So again, if you look at any article around, mergers and acquisitions, I talk about this a lot, but if if you look at the number of health systems that have been acquired and they're larger and larger health systems, sometimes they're not functioning as a health system. They're functioning as individual hospitals, and we might find that their ability to kind of step away from the problem and think about how to function as a health system, there can be significant savings on the table to leverage their scale. Versus today, it might be like, hey, this hospital is operating independently of this one. They might have the same name, but individually they might be operating differently. And I think our ability to understand that and help them through that journey, I think can vary. I think culturally, I think if you're looking at working in California versus maybe in New York City, very different culturally. So again, some folks are a little more, open to certain ideas and others are not. So I think our ability to understand their environment or their traffic patterns or things that might be constraints for them will and can impact some recommendations we make.
Right.
So there's certainly it's a we want to be consistent, but yeah, there's a lot of inconsistencies. Just again, just because of the
Yeah,
environment they're in, or just structurally and how they're set up as a health system.
right. And also probably the problems at different place and hospitals are different. So the efficiency needs also probably will be different at different stage of their hospitals, right? Which stage they are in, a particular medical.
Yeah, I mean, some are. I mean, you might have a very large hospital that you can. There's some justification for maybe it's robotics or automation or conveyance system, whatever it is. Like there's more justification there because there's scale. But in some of these smaller hospitals and health systems, they might not have the aggregate scale. They might
Right,
not. So the justification for those technologies might not be there. So again, for me, it's like if the justification's not there and the throughput's not required, then you have to get back to the basics. You got to get back to how do you do, basic inventory management? How do you manage your people and not, you're not wasting time doing tasks that don't mean anything to the day-to-day operation. It's like how do you break those things down to say 40% of your work is non-value add, and it's like what can those be automated? Can those go away? Are they needed? Can we think about the world differently? Those
right,
in general might lead to some additional value for them.
right. And also in certain places like in Asia and specifically in India, the volume of patients is humongous. So that also kind of uh, brings a lot of different scale related changes, scale and quality that makes a lot of difference,
Absolutely.
importance as well as the variety of patients and the data you get. It's kind of tremendous. So you guys also think of operating outside of United States and Europe and Asia as well?
We do. Yeah, we do work outside, yeah, in Asia Pac or Middle East, or not as much in Africa, but yeah, some in the South America region as well. And it's again, everyone's different. I mean, we've done, for example, did a project in Ireland, a brand new children's hospital. It's still being built. You think about just how in the U.S. market, they have more of a distributor model where you have, a lot of suppliers going to one distributor that goes to a hospital. In that environment, it's a lot of onesie twosie deliveries and a lot of traffic and a lot more things that maybe in the US we're like, hey, it's one truck. In the future, it could be for example, in Ireland, it could be 30 different small little courier trucks arriving every day with different
Mhm.
things. And it creates the complexity of how do you think about the world differently when you have so many things coming and going. And now I don't just manage one person or one, like supplier in the US. It might be like, yeah, I have 30 different things I have to manage and make sure they're delivering. Are they on time? Are they late? Or are they missing? It
Mhm.
gets more complex, no doubt.
Right. So in the healthcare, primarily when you have a lot of kind of regulatory stuff, right? So there's a lot of regulatory stuff and which needs to be fulfilled. How and that's why a lot of kind of businesses fear getting into that particular domain. So how do you see it, like, is it it changes quite often, it's pretty stringent, or kind of navigating this whole kind of process? What has been your experience in this particular field?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at like for example the what I would call sterile processing, which is sterilization of instruments for surgeries. I mean, it's highly there's a lot of rules and regulations and guidelines and all those things, and I think when somebody's getting into that space, I think there's a big learning curve to understand what you can and can't do, and that just takes years to build that experience. And again, there's a lot of vendors and suppliers and in that space as well. And again, I think having those relationships and working with them on projects or interacting with them on how the industry is changing or how the requirements are changing, like all those things just requires a lot of effort. You know what I mean? It's just like you can't just go read it in a book somewhere. Yeah, I mean, it's like you have to have relationships with a lot of different folks, and there's a lot of the stuff is published in terms of like the regulations, but there's still a lot of interpretation, and it comes to that. That's where like that again, the data only takes you so far, and then there's the judgment that you have around these different regulations when they apply and when there's exceptions. And yeah, it's not easy. Yeah, it takes many years.
Right. So I understand you are a techie, and what part of your job you enjoy the most? I'm sure you have been you need to deal with a lot of different things in a day to day, right? So what part of the job that you enjoy the most?
Yeah, I mean, obviously for me, there's two main things. I mean, one is I think as a company and as an organization, we want to make an impact on healthcare. We want to move the needle on the healthcare supply chain. So I think that's one is like, are we getting on the best projects? Are we working with the best clients? Are we working on some of the more complicated things? For me, it's like that's exciting to fact that hey, we're working with 17 of the top 20 health systems in the country. For me, that's a great thing. Those folks continue. They have the scale. They want to do things. They want to kind of push the boundaries. We have many clients that are not the top 20, but again, I think it's a matter of us continue to push those. I think the other one is I think as we as a company continue to evolve our services, is to continue to invest in technologies or adjust our approach and making sure that we're again staying ahead, like I mentioned earlier about the speed to value. How do you make sure that we continue to evolve our tools and our approach to again make sure that we're adding value to clients and that we're able to address their challenges in a timely fashion versus it takes weeks and weeks and weeks to get to a decision or a recommendation. So I think that's something for me is forefront is how do we continue to invest in ourselves to again to stay ahead for what it's worth, whether it's the services we're offering or our approach and how we're doing our work.
Right. So another related question is that, so when you hire for your company, what typically you look for in people? Of course, there has to be kind of alignment in whatever requirements are. Otherwise, apart from that, anything specific you look for when you hire someone?
Honestly, I think that the ones that I always say, and I think it still holds true after a couple decades, is I think at its core, somebody has to be curious. Somebody has to
Mhm.
be curious to want to learn. They want to be curious about what's going on with a client. Like if you're coming in to kind of like check the boxes, again, not a good fit. Again, for us, I think is kind of step one. I think being in more of a consulting and engineering role, again, things change a lot, like I mentioned earlier. So our ability to be flexible, I think, is going to be important. Again, sometimes flexibility is not always a good thing, but I think we have to be flexible. Times things change, data changes. I think is an important aspect of it. And then honestly, I think just I hate to say it's kind of cliche, but it's like the grit. I mean, I think just trying to work your way through something, and again, we have timelines, we have things have to be done, and again, sometimes the wheels are churning and it feels like we're delaying, but that ability to kind of work through it and get the stuff done based on the timeline is incredibly important because clients are maybe waiting for us to make a recommendation so they can start making other decisions. So I would say those are probably the three main things that come to mind.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, being in a very high demanding kind of a position, so my last question would be that how do you balance your life, work life balance? That is one of the key thing, I guess, to be happy and also probably deliver your best, right? So what do you do and how do you make that happen?
Yeah, I mean that's I've been trying to figure that out for 2 decades now. But no, I think in general, the thing that I've found again, I've been doing more cycling. In terms of on the road, cycling, and for me, it's like you got to focus on the road. You got to focus what you're doing. There's a competitiveness to it. There's the ability to kind of focus on yourself for you to get better. I think that's kind of a main thing. I think at the end of the day, this job and the things that we do never end. Again, you can justify not taking vacation all day long, but you have to look out for yourself. You have to be able to take time. You got to schedule the time. You got to communicate. You got to do all those things, and to kind of disconnect. And you have to find stuff that you enjoy. Again, it's easy to say, hey, I can just get consumed in work. But if you don't like, let's say you're not golfing, you're not cycling, and you're not going, on vacations, or you're not doing A, B, and C, then again, you might say, well, I have kids, or I have families, or I have other commitments like volunteering. I mean, you got to find what you enjoy, and that's sometimes can't just be all work. You have to find other things that pique your interest or keep you motivated, or just keep you sane more than anything.
Right. Yeah. At that note, so you need to enjoy what you're doing. And if you enjoy what you're doing, probably that's the best thing you are at. And thank you so much for your time. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been a lot of learning. And thanks a lot and have a great day.
You too. It's great. Appreciate the opportunity. Have a good afternoon. Take care.